Good morning. Oh, we're sleepy on a Friday. Let's try that again. Good morning. Good morning. As Christina said, I'm Rebecca Dean. I'm the Senior Associate Dean in the College of Liberal Arts, and my home discipline is political science. So I am so thrilled to be with you today. And on behalf of the College of Liberal Arts and the Office of the Dean, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this magnificent day of scholarship, learning, and sharing of experiences. Bienvenidos a todos. When I was a newly minted PhD, starting here at UT Arlington in the late 1990s, there wasn't a class on women and the political process. And I was keen to develop this course, and my department chair was very supportive. So off I went with the enthusiasm of youth. A few months later, I was at an academic conference, and I was excited to share with my grad school friends what a great place I had landed in and how supportive people were. And I was talking about the class that I was developing. And an acquaintance said, with a perfectly straight face, "Are you on semesters or quarters?" And my face looked like this. And he said, "Well, I mean, there can't be enough material for 16 weeks, surely." Clearly, there is and was so much more really cool stuff than could be fit into a semester. Just as I know that the knowledge and wisdom shared today will only scratch the surface of what this team of researchers have uncovered. It was about 2.5 years ago that I first became aware of the Mellon Foundation's commitment to support the project, the fruits of which you'll hear throughout the day today. I was fortunate to be a campus resource for those faculty interested in submitting applications, and I was thrilled when I learned that my colleague, Dr. Cristina Salinas, would be participating. Dr. Salinas investigates the places, spaces, and voices with which Latinos and Chicanos have expressed their agency and the ways that they have resisted when that power is denied. What you will hear today is the result of the collaboration that she and her co-PIs, Dr. Jennifer Najera from the University of California, Riverside, and Michelle Tagis from the University of Arizona have built. They have nurtured meaningful and significant relationships with Chicanas y Latinas who are on the ground in activism, legal representation, or serving as elected or appointed public servants. We are fortunate to have several with us today to share their experiences. So again, welcome to campus and to a terrific day of learning and collaboration. Felicidades.
All right, good morning. The coffee is coming, we promise. So I'm Michelle Thayes. I'm a professor at the University of Arizona in the Department of Mexican American Studies. I'm thrilled to see you all here. I'm thrilled to be with my colegas. We want to just welcome you and to sort of mark the work that we've done together over the last 2 years. It's truly an honor to have learned from the women that we interviewed, the work that we did together and what we learned together, and really to see this project come to life today, where we will be having the opportunity to further learn and listen to each other and exchange experiences. So we wanted to start by sharing a bit about how this project came to fruition and talk about why we're all here today.
Good morning. There's this big screen here, but hopefully I'm not talking with my back to any of you. My name is Jennifer Najera. I'm a professor of ethnic studies at the University of California at Riverside. It's an understatement to say that I'm thrilled to be here today in the company of my highly esteemed and really beloved colleagues, Dr. Michelle Thayes and Dr. Cristina Salinas, and 7 of the fantastic women that we have interviewed for our project. What a dream to bring all of these powerful women together. And honestly, really even beyond the dream that we had, when we began brainstorming this project. So the idea that we had, the vision that we had when we applied for this grant was that we wanted to do a an oral history project, a community-based oral history project of women, Chicana, Mexicana, fronteriza women from the border regions of the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas and the southern Arizona region around Tucson, just to think about how these women had been community advocates, how they had been community activists, how they've been involved in politics. And we wanted to have as expansive an idea of politics as possible, right? So we start to think about women who've been working in immigration, women who've been working, running for school board, women who've been working in the law, women who've been working, for environmental justice in colonias. And it has truly been just a wealth of riches in terms of thinking about all the stories that we have heard from these women and to learn about all the ways that they have shaped for the better their communities and really creating more justice, right, in all the places where they have been. I guess back to the point of the dean, we've also really wanted to highlight the historical contributions of women because in general, we have a lot of stories about, the great male narratives of history who often, do like to take the limelight, but it's often women who are on the ground doing the work that really moves change forward and makes it sustainable. And that was important for us to really think about the historical contributions of some of the women and, the women in these different regions.
Good morning. So my name is Cristina Salinas, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of History here at UT Arlington. And I'm also a member of the core faculty for with the Center for Mexican American Studies here at UT Arlington. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the genesis of the project. And we've been talking about women and their work, the lives that they've dedicated to the work of justice that they have, just the amazing energy that they've brought to the work that they've done. But in terms of the origins of the project, the reason that we wanted to situate this project on the border was because of course, the narratives in the media about the border. And I'm specifically thinking about this one, it was a series in NPR, I mean, years ago, so it wasn't recent. I mean, obviously these narratives have been around for some time. And there was an NPR series about the border in the Valley, and it was about corruption. So the entire series was about was looking at corruption on the border in various guises or various frames. And one of the stories was about politiqueras. And some of you may not be familiar with that term politiquera because it's, as I've come to understand, maybe a Valley-specific term. But it is women, political mobilizers, vote getters on the ground, who bring people to the polls to vote. And the whole story, though, around politiqueras was about how, the corruption aspect of it and how they are paid or they pay people. And it was just about also the corruption of the electoral political system in the Valley, basically, right? The whole thing in the context of the border. And I felt that story was very reductive about women's political participation. Because even that politiquera story is much more complicated than the way it was portrayed. Yet also thinking about women's political participation, as we mentioned, broadly defined, is much more about community building, mobilizing their own family and kinship networks. And that aspect of bringing people to vote of the people that that's just about mobilizing your community. And that's the work that women have done. And that's what I wanted to start. That was the sort of the seeds of this project. How do we look at the history of Mexicana and Chicana women's participation on the community level and rethink what it means on the border, rethink what it means in terms of community building, community sustainability, even an expansive notion of citizenship. Meaning sustaining local communities. And so that was the sort of beginning of the idea. And then we created the grant proposal collaboratively. So we had this small idea and then we just built it out together. And so part of the other aspect that we'll be talking about this morning is just working in collaboration and also exploring that aspect of collaboration, how women themselves have also sustained these movements and this activism through collaboration. And so we've tried to practice that in our own research project. So I just wanted to share that aspect of what we'll be exploring and what we found in the stories that we've done with the oral histories. Sorry, I also wanted to mention why we decided on the border. I mean, part of the story was again like trying to explore different elements of what it means to be on the border. And so for me, I'm from the Valley. That's my hometown, my home area. I'm from Edcouch-Elsa. So I was very interested in the Valley, in the border area of the Valley. But then we also realized, or we tried to think about another border space, and we felt like Tucson and Southern Arizona just be an interesting comparison because there are many things that are similar in terms of, in general, the politics of Texas and the politics of Arizona. So and how people have had to try to negotiate those politics. And so we felt like studying women's activism and looking at women's activism in the Valley of South Texas, as well as the Southern Arizona, would really bring some interesting stories together. And also we felt like maybe those were areas that hadn't been studied as much. You know, we know about, Chicana women's history in other parts of Texas, other parts of California, but we felt like, okay, we can also focus on South Texas and bring those stories out and Southern Arizona. So that was part of also our impetus for making this a comparative project.
Okay, I'm just going to say a few notes about what we've been doing for the last 2 years, and then we'll move forward with our program. So we have been, and I had never been I grew up in San Diego, Tijuana, so I'm also fronteriza, but from a totally different area. And I've been living in Arizona for 19 years. So both border regions have really shaped, who I am as a scholar and as a person, right? And so coming to the Valley over the last year and a half has just been amazing. And so we've made, I think, about 5 trips. We've also presented our work at our UTRGV for their Border Studies Conference. And then with this year, we've been focusing on Tucson. So we've been able to interview women there in Tucson. I think we've made 3 trips, right? So really getting to know the social, political, ecologies and landscapes of both regions as a way to tell the stories of these women. So, we asked, them, their life history, sort of how they got into the work that they were doing to understand their own community formation and their relationship to their community, their families, and sort of the national politics, right? Okay, so I want to sort of pivot, and also talk a little bit about why Arlington, right? Why we're here in Texas. Because we came from 3 different locations, right? We wanted to understand sort of specifically Arizona and Texas, but then we wanted to, collaborate with some of the communities here in Arlington, some of the centers. And so I wanted to just say thank you to the history department team, to the chair, Stephanie Cole, Julie Hazard, Joe Wilcott, Joe Carpenter, who's there recording. Thank you so much. The CMAS team, Director Javier Medina Vidal, Diana Botello, Monica Lopez, Angelino Honsa Gandara, who made a beautiful program for you all. And then I'm going to pass it to Jennifer so she can talk a little bit more about who we're. Thank you.
The staff is what makes everything run beautifully here. They feed us, they make us look good. Yeah, the program is Angel here? He's not here. I mean, the program, it's the first time I got it, I almost cried. It just looks so beautiful. So please take it. Please take it. And, as a memento, of course, we would be remiss without thanking our amazing graduate student researchers who've been part of our project. So Actually, if I could have you stand up, we were really fortunate with the grant to be able to have 3 graduate students our first year. Diana Lopez from the University of Texas El Paso, who is a graduate student in the Department of History. Jessica Martinez, there you are. Jessica Martinez, who is also a graduate student in the Department of History. Cheyenne Trabuco, who is a graduate student in history at the University of Houston. And then our second year, the current year, so these are the students who were with us in Texas and helping us with the oral histories there. This year, we have Brittany Jimenez, who is at the University of California, Santa Cruz, in Latino and Latin American Studies. We have Vanessa Ramirez, who is a graduate student in English at the University of North Texas in Denton. And last but not least, we have Leah Boaz, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, who is a graduate student here in history at UT Arlington. And, you know, these young women have just been really instrumental in the way that they have shaped the project. So we come in, you know, the way that the grant was structured was such that there was a mentorship element, right? So this is why they assigned graduate students to us. So the idea being that we have 3 professors and that each year, we'd have 3 graduate students to mentor. But the way that it really turned out was that we were learning a lot from the graduate students as well. So I feel like we're really fortunate to have this interdisciplinary, intergenerational experience and exchange of knowledge with these brilliant young women. And then, we should have known that it would come out this way. But then as, we are doing the oral histories, we're sitting in community with these women that we've interviewed. Sometimes I'm sitting there listening to somebody tell me a story. I remember very vividly listening to interviewing Mrs. de los Santos, and, she was talking to me about, the organizing that she was doing and how she was balancing family life. And I remember thinking, like, after the interview, can I just call you when I'm having problems with my husband sometimes? Because this is hard. And, I'm not nearly the organizer that, Mrs. de los Santos was in her day, still obviously doing the good work. But it turns out to be not just a 2-generation mentorship process, but really a multi-generational mentorship experience. And for that really unseen blessing, I'm so, so grateful. So thank you all for that.
So I also wanted to mention some of the research questions that guided the work. And so these were that helped us shape the questions that we asked, and that we hope when we are thinking about how we want to work with some of the stories that are shaping our analysis as well. So some of the questions that we wanted to know more about was how do women utilize personal relationships, kinship and community networks to create and sustain political mobilization. And so that was one of the main questions that we wanted to know about how women specifically organize politically. And we also wanted to understand this historically. So how has Mexican American political participation been perceived, been viewed historically speaking, and then how has this activism and women's political participation changed or challenged some of those narratives? And then also we wanted to know how women's organizing in electoral politics, but also other activist fields, like let's say education, or looking at environmental justice or immigration advocacy. So how those 2 areas influence each other. So how activism has influenced the political process in terms of even direct relationships, people knowing each other and being able to, bring issues and hold elected officials accountable, or just educate elected officials, and elected officials being very responsive to these community issues like housing, especially like in the colonias and other kinds of issues that we see in the Valley area, for example, and other areas along the border. So those were the questions that were guiding us. And that's been some of the through lines in terms of some of the stories that we've found, some of the narratives that people have told, and hopefully some of that will come out as the day goes on. The goals. Oh, the goals. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to our two graduate students, Shine and Brittany. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention some of what our long-term goals are. So of course, we are trying to write some of these up. We're going to be writing in collaboration with the graduate students. So we're writing collaboratively articles, maybe an edited volume, so coming together into a book. So that's one of our long-term goals in terms of the project. Other goals are we are going to be having a website, so a public-facing website that shares parts of all of the women's stories that we've interviewed. So it'll have images, maybe some of the documents or other sort of pieces that they've shared with us. We can scan them and have them there. And then little parts of snippets of the audio interview. So, just pieces there that people can go to and learn more about the individual stories. So that's part of our goal, is having a website. And then also we're developing a repository, so where the entire interviews will be held. So the interviews in their entirety will be available for people who are interested in learning more about these histories. And so there's a kind of a historical archive that we're putting together, and we'll learn more about that as the day goes on as well. And then, of course, the website where people can learn more and have little snippets of the stories, as well as images. And we're going to have it kind of set up in a kind of with an interactive map, so we can geographically, sort of place people and see how women have moved, across spaces in their own individual lives, but also how their work has intersected with other women as they've been working in the same geographical regions. So that's part of what we have planned for the some of the kind of things that are gonna come out of this grant. And so what we wanted to do next was invite Brittany and also Shine to come up to demonstrate or show the first draft of the website that we are developing with a team from the University of Arizona.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Diana Lopez, and I'm a PhD candidate at UT El Paso. I have the privilege and honor of introducing the Texas panel today. It's been so soul-nourishing to not only hear their histories a couple months ago, but to spend time with them during breakfast and listen to the histories and the way that they continue to provide to our community. So I'm really excited that you all get to hear from them. And if the panelists can do a little wave when I say your name, so that the people in the back can see who you are. Alma Canales was born in La Rosita, Texas, and currently resides in Waco. She was raised by a family of farm workers and worked in the field until she graduated from high school. While attending UT Pan American, she worked full-time for the Edinburgh Daily Review. Here, she learned about the Mexican American Youth Organization and gained interest in the Chicana movement at PASO, the political association of Spanish-speaking organization. At Colonias del Valle, she volunteered to support social and service clinics for farm workers needing legal and housing assistance. Canales began her involvement in politics in the 60s, collecting signatures to establish La Raza Unida Party. In her 20s, Canales became the first Chicana woman to run for lieutenant governor in Texas. She continued advocating for her community through involvement in LULAC's Head Start program, and Canales continues to inspire young people for the cause. Gloria Casas. Gloria Santillán Casas has lived in La Feria, Texas since 1977. Her public service work began at a young age as a Spanish interpreter for women in her community. She then went on to work as an outreach worker in Brownsville, and in La Feria, she was a center manager, reinforcing her knowledge of social justice and community care alongside social workers. Casa's political involvement began by blog walking for the first Latino county judge candidate, Rey Ramon. She went on to become a school board trustee for La Feria ISD, educating Latinos in her community about the political process and how it can benefit them. She served as a board member for the Texas Association of School Boards for 12 years. Casas is proud to help bring programs like Year of La Feria to La Feria ISD, and she currently still serves in La Feria School Board of Trustees. Ofelia de los Santos lives in Edinburgh, Texas. From a young age, de los Santos was involved in the Catholic Youth Organization, where she served as president. She earned a BA in political science from Pan American University and a law degree from the University of Houston. I waited. While living in Austin, she became involved in politics through the Chicana political caucus. Upon her return to the Valley, she started the Hidalgo County Women's Political Caucus, at which time she also became involved with Valley Interfaith. She is now retired from practicing law and continues serving the community through her work with the Catholic Diocese of Brownsville. Petra Guerra grew up in the Valley and currently lives in Mission, Texas. As a young adult, she worked for the Utah and Idaho Migrant Council, establishing childhood development centers for the two states. During her time in the fields, she continued to fortify her social justice awareness through the Colegio Jacinto Treviño. Guerra earned a bachelor's degree from Boise State and continued her education pursuing law at the University of Texas. She attended law school at the University of Texas and later earned a PhD in broadcasting from Washington State University. She spent 20 years in New York City and was involved in the Workers' World Party and the Venceremos Brigade. Guerra is currently a communication lecturer at South Texas College. Please join me in welcoming all of the panelists with a round of applause. And as a reminder, we will have 10 minutes for each participant to share of their stories, and then Jessica will moderate and follow up with questions, and we'll open it up for questions for the audience as well. Thank you.
Okay, testing. First turn it on. Okay. Everything's real. She can't stand over there? Yeah, it's better if you stand over there. That's fine, yeah. Can you, aquí? Okay, can you all hear me? Although if my husband was here, he would say, no necesita microphone ya. Ella habla. Me llamo Gloria Santillán Casas, and it is really an honor, truly an honor to share my life experience with you. I started with, I would say, politics, if you could say, in 1970. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a rancho. A teacher took us to a housing project because we didn't have any facilities in a rancho. At one point, we had no light, no toilet, nada, había houses and what have you. So a teacher took interest in me and moved us to a housing project. No, hombre, parecía un palacio. We would go to the housing project. In 1970, I started working with community, Cameron County Community Projects, which was, CAP agency. And through that job, I was able to continue doing what I did, when we were in the housing project, was advocating for families. I didn't know I was advocating. They would take me to interpret. And I would determine what to tell the ladies, because sometimes the caseworkers were very, very rude, very, very ugly to the ladies. And so I would determine, what the lady needed to hear, like, for example, see, you all are a bunch of wetbacks that just came to United States to live free and what have you. And the lady would say, ¿Qué dice que nos va a ayudar? Que todo va bien. Que no, muchas gracias, muchas gracias. I think it was so insensitive for them to hear that. So, fast forward in 1970, Esteban Ramon, the first Latino, person to run for county judge, was our executive director. So I got to know him by working in the CAP agency, and he was a fabulous man. I mean, he knew, he cared. And so I learned about the political process and through block walking and through the importance of people being registered to vote and why our vote mattered. So I also learned the concept of what is called donachona. How many of you know what the concept of donachona means in community? Okay, that is the key to us being able to build trust in communities. Because in the housing project, my mother was a donachona. Everybody went to my mom because she had the interpreter, which was me. And so we use the donachona concept to go into communities. Now, I'm getting a little bit out of line, but now MD Anderson has a project called Community Scientists. It's basically the donachona concept because they do research and cada community is different. So they have what is called community scientists. We study communities and we give feedback to MD Anderson on how to have people trust in the screening process for cancer. Okay, so let me go back to 1970, which is 55 years ago. It's when I started learning about the political process. In 1979, my husband and I moved back to the Valley. My husband went to school on a migrant scholarship. So we lived in Michigan for our first 5 years of marriage. And we learned, we looked at the Valley from the outside when we came back. And I've always had the belief que si se puede, ¿cómo que no se puede? We just need to address it, si se puede. So we came back and about 10 years after being in La Feria, no, about 6 years after being in La Feria, we had 4 children, and the youngest one wanted to go to school in La Feria. Él quería hacer with his neighbors to go to school. I went before the school board, and I asked if there was any way we could get him in. And then at that point, they had made a decision for the bilingual program that you could only get in if you were Spanish dominant. And my son was not. Él es más chiquito de los cuatro, so obviously he knew English. So no me lo aceptaron. And I went before the school board, and they said, no, we can't, blah, blah, blah. Well, I went to TEA. I don't know how in the world I learned about TEA back then. And I asked, who made that decision? Who could make that decision? We'll come to find out that it was a local decision. So I went back to the school board and I said, this is a local decision. You have a lot of kids like my child who wants to be part of this class, the llamaba esto class. But because he was not Spanish dominant, he wasn't eligible. And so the school board was made out of gente que really did not support our cultura at all. And so the board president told me, I said, do you know that you all made the decision to keep my child out of school because he was not Spanish dominant? You all have the authority. And so he answered back to me, Mr. Calloway, and said, yes, we made that decision. And I said, well, that does not represent the community. So fast forward 4 or 5 years later, a bunch of teachers got together and asked me to run for school board. I said, no, hombre, aquí no se puede. I mean, I could tell the community no se podía, but they insisted. So I went ahead
and I did my block walking that I learned in 1970. La Feria was not that big, so I went ahead and did my block walking. On the Saturday of election day, I was sitting in the corner. I was really tired. I had walked for 2 weeks. And one of the candidates, Mr. Calloway, came by bajo la ventana and said, Ms. Casas, good campaign, better like next time. And I said, well, thank you very much, Mr. Calloway, I appreciate that. My husband almost had a heart attack. And he said, se está burlando de ti. I said, déjalo, I'm not gonna win, Jaime. You know, I've talked to people, they don't understand, they have the power. Well, at 7 o'clock in the evening, I had won. And I was like, oh my God. First time that they had an election, first time a woman Latina had, as they got elected to the school board. So my 28 years, I got elected in 1994. My first, let's see, yeah, 20, I started my 29th year. During those years, I've represented the whole region, I mean, the whole valley at the state level for 12 years. I represented Texas and Washington at the National Hispanic Congress. And the reason that I'm sharing this is que, you know, si se puede if we do the basic, which is educating. You can never stop sharing with people how the process works. Because guess what I'm doing right now is telling our families, if we do not get involved in the legislative process, we are going to implement rules que nos mandan. So we need to have input in how the laws are going to be made. Si no, después no se quejen, no estemos llorando, pues ahora tenemos que hacer esto lo otro. You had an opportunity to elect a person that was going to speak for you. You have an opportunity to say how that law is going to affect your community. Because not all communities are the same. Going back to Dona Chona into community scientists, we have to know our community. So I'm very involved with the local legislative process. And si estamos en Texas. Okay, in Texas, you know, I may not agree with your political party, but if you're the governor, I'm gonna work with you. Okay, we cannot, ahorita hay mucho division. Todos estamos peleando for the party. Well, guess what? You have to work with them. You know, Governor Abbott y yo, best friends. We're best friends, I promise you. Because, you know, we have to work with them. We have to speak for our community. We have to vote for people that we know. We have to follow them through their career, political career. We have to see how they vote. We have to see what they support. And we need to continue speaking for our community. So now that I'm 76, I'm still arguing with vital statistics. Am I really 76? Not that I don't look at it or don't feel it, but where did 76 years go? You know, where is 76 years? God gave me 76 years. What did I do with those 76 years? So, you know, I am very, very happy to be here. I thank Dr. Nájera for inviting me to be here. Remember, get to know the person that you vote for and never forget that you are the community scientist for your community. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to skip me because I don't want to follow. Good girl. Are you serious?
Go ahead, Ophelia. I have to stand. So my political awareness of who I was in the whole general scheme of things did not happen, and don't hold your breath, but did not happen until I had my 3 kids. I was living in Austin, and I got very interested in an organization called the Chicana Political Caucus. And our guest speaker's mother and I became friends. And since I had little kids at home, my husband was working for TEA at the time in the a department called desegregation of schools. His job was to go to the public schools in Texas and make sure that they still didn't separate the Anglos from the Mexicans, from the Blacks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was staying home because I had two little kids, 2 years apart. And Martha reached out to me, and one of the meetings that I went, I met her, I just was taken with her so much. And she became my mentor, and she said, well, you can help us in this way. So you can't come to the meetings. We'll bring you some lists of people to call when you have important votes at the city council or at the legislature. I said, yeah, sure. I mean, I got stacks of, those computer generated big sheets. And I was faithful. And so I would call, and then I would call and say, I'm ready for another one. We became good friends. Much later on, her husband, who's an architect, ended up in La Jolla when we ended up in La Jolla, Texas, building some schools for us. And we became fast friends. Last night, I told a group of ladies, and this is for Jennifer. Where's Jennifer? I told a group of ladies that one of the best advice that I ever received from Martha Cotera was when I was wanting to divorce my husband, because I was going to college. I was in my 30s. This was right after I moved from Austin to La Jolla. And I had childcare and I had money because my husband was the school superintendent, but I wanted to get involved. I was in my 30s and I had never been to college, and I was older than most of the kids at school, but I loved the whole idea of learning. For the first time in my life, I was Ophelia. I wasn't somebody's mother, somebody's wife, somebody's daughter. I was my own person. And that for me was very empowering. So there was Barca to help the Salvadorian refugees who are coming across the borders. I joined that with Nita Kruger. Then Juanita Valdez Cox got me involved with the farm worker supporter movement. And there I was helping Cesar Chavez coming to town. Funny story. I had a big car. It was an Oldsmobile and it was a diesel because the best gas, right? Mileage. And I had to drive from La Jolla to Pan American University in Denver. And I felt kind of guilty when I'd go and volunteer with the farm workers. They barely had cars, right? And I had this big old thing. And then one day, Juanita Valdez called me and she said, Caesar, because they call him Caesar. Caesar's coming to the valley. And nobody has a nice enough car to drive him around in. Can we borrow your car? I go, yeah, sure. And that was like, okay, I can drive my car. At the end of that, he left a little jar of honey in the car, Subi honey. I'll never forget it because that's what he used so that he wouldn't run his voice down. And I carried around with me, moved around so many places until I finally lost it. But that was, Cesar Chavez for me was, so I joined that and everything that came along. We needed a political caucus for women. We formed one in Hidalgo County and we made the people in power listen to us, and we made little small changes here and there. And then one day, while I had already graduated from college, someone called me and said they wanted to meet with me about an organization that was coming to the valley that was going to change the way things were done politically. Well, that got my interest because in spite of being involved, and I was involved with the Mexican American Democrats as well. And in spite of being involved with all these organizations, guess what my job always was? It was not being president. It was not being vice president. It was not even being secretary. It was cooking the rice and beans for the pachanga during the meeting. Okay, and that was all the women. We were relegated to those roles. Filomena Leo was a very good friend of mine, and on the website can attest to this. So in La Jolla, which is a very political town, we organized 9 women right away for the political caucus and then reached out to the rest. And we made a difference. But when this call came in about this new organization, I was interested because I was wearing myself out going to all these different meetings. And so it was Ernesto Cortez Jr. who came and interviewed me with the Industrial Areas Foundation. And he said, would you like to be, they've already studied you, the time they meet with you, the IAS studies you, knows all about you. And he said to me, how would you like to be a member of the most powerful organization in the Valley? And I said, I'm there. What do I need to do? Right? I was tired. I was tired of things never changing for us, the women. And so from there, I met Jim Drake, the lead organizer. And from there, we were sent to Staten Island for a 10-day training on how to be a leader in an organization that did grassroots organizing at its highest level. I have never worked with such professional people. And yes, we were called communists because Saul Alinsky started the IAF, along with Bishop Shield from Chicago and Marshall Fields that owns the big store. and those three. They started that because they knew they needed to get drastic about getting the powers that be listen to the common folk. They were making decisions for us that we didn't even understand. And so The Back of the Yards was the first book that we were made to read by Upton Sinclair. If you haven't read that book, read it. It's in Chicago politics, and you all know Chicago politics has been very powerful over the years. So they gave us a list of books to read. They sent us to training. They kind of said, okay, so you're a member of farm workers and Salvadorians and women's and what have you done? And I was like, well, we've done a lot, yeah, we've done a lot. And they showed me that there is another way to do this. And again, it's like Gloria said, not political parties, but the polis that's spoken about by the Greeks, the people, the main people, that the polis, that's where you have to go. Politics with a little p, not partisan politics. That was different for me. The other thing that I liked about the IAF is they organized through my church. I've always been a church lady. My kids call me a church lady. I've always been a church lady. I've always been involved. And the organizers came to the bishop came to the priest, and they said, you will give your top leaders an opportunity to meet these organizers. The top leaders in every church, women. And so I like that. All of a sudden, we were primary leaders, not just the men. Yes, some of the men were sprinkled in there, but we tolerated them. We learned so much about how to get the vote out. In 1 year, 1983 to 84, during a big freeze that we had in the valley, the Southwest Voter Registration Project from San Antonio came to us because we were organized. In order to have power in politics, you need organized people and you need organized money. The Catholic Church has both. And not only the Catholic Church, we got some Methodists, some Lutherans involved because it's ecumenical. And we started doing voter registration drive during the lines that people lined up for government cheese and all this other. I remember taking my daughter with me, my little daughter, because, sometimes we have to take our kids with us. And she said, Mom, how come we don't get a package like that? It's got this cheese and it's got this milk. And I said, we don't qualify. We don't qualify. And so she helped me register voters. At the end of it all, we registered 25,000 new voters across the valley, which is 4 counties, through Valley Interfaith and the churches. You wait for people after Mass, register them to vote. And then there were some people in the church that hated us. They said, you shouldn't be involved in this. In other words, politics it's despicable. It's for other people. Church people don't do that. Well, Bishop Fitzpatrick taught us that if we didn't get involved in changing our own lives, then we had no one to blame but ourselves. And so I learned that the government sometimes gave you cheese in order to keep you helpless. And we learned that no one should do for someone else what they can do for themselves. That's the iron rule of the IAF. I was involved with them for 6 years across a 4-county area. My husband almost divorced me. That's when I wrote to Martha. I said, Martha, what do I do? Because it's going to be such a hard time about this. And she wrote to me, Ophelia, he's a good man. Stay with him because life is too short to live it with more than one man. And so this year I'll be 55 years with that man. And he told me, go to your conference. I know you're going to talk about me. Enjoy yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Ophelia.
You're welcome. This is
These ladies aren't speaking any less, so I'm gonna do my 10 minutes. Is that already 10 minutes? 10 minutes. I was a young girl in Edinburgh, Texas in 1965. The first to go to a little school called Pan American College. And I got a little scholarship for journalism. They didn't have that degree at that school, but that's what the donor of the money had given them the money for. So the little town newspaper hired me to work there, the Edinburgh Daily Review. I was telling the comadre over here, you know how La Raza is down in the valley. They called it the Daily Mistake.
Yeah.
But that exposure to the community, new opportunities, my daddy had served in World War II. So we were the generation that was being born after these young men went to places unknown, the experiences they had not had, and it was new to our community. So we kind of had doors open for us that we walked through. And then we felt like we had to open doors for other folks. There was 4 young men studying at St. Mary's University in San Antonio. They were doing graduate work, and they started looking up statistics. And when you look up statistics in the Census Bureau and publications like that, you start to get numbers and data, and you have to do something with it. What they noticed is it was personal. It was all about us. We were, the high school graduation rates were horrible. A life expectancy was very low. The jobs and training were not designed, those programs were not designed with us in mind. We had to go tear down those doors for ourselves. Hidalgo County. Hidalgo County is a large county in the valley. We walked the streets and told people, we're gonna do a third party to make changes. Has anybody ever figured out by this time then what a third party even is? Do that. The same thing happened at the school when we were gonna form a Mexican American youth organization. We invited everybody to come to a little meeting. We're gonna talk about changes and things that were going on, current events. And that room went down the middle. This half, you can't organize on the basis of being Mexican. And the other half, we need to change. Everything needs to be changed. So I was just gutsy. I just said, you watch me. I was 17 when I went to college. I didn't know nothing. I had been a migrant farm worker. That's where our family was. But on the first day of school, my mom and dad made sure we got to the first day of school on the day it opened. That was the most important thing there was. So when I went to college, I took it pretty serious. When it meant activism for our community to make changes, I took it real serious. That's all I did was go to community meetings at Colonias del Valle and all these places these ladies are mentioning. That's how we did it. And to organize a third party, we walked blocks and we knocked on doors. We had a can of soda and a bag of Fritos at the end of the block. That was what we got for lunch because we had to get a certain number of signatures in a certain number of days to be able to be placed on a ballot. We had to learn that on the fly. We didn't know anything about politics or how it worked. A single party controlled the valley back then. I'm talking 1969. Do you know people that were born then? Well, in order to stay on that ballot, we also had to reach a certain amount of percentage vote. So we qualified to be on the ballot. We organized a Partido de la Raza Unida. We had all these naysayers saying you can't do that on the basis of race, you're going to separate yourself. The activism was the point. The activism and the process and people learning to participate because the pessimism, the people saying, oh, it's not going to make a difference. What is that called? When you
Apathy.
Apathy, thank you, man. I knew I wasn't going to be as good as y'all.
You're good.
But that made us more determined to get people. It also gave us fertile ground for people to come. They were waiting for somebody to knock on that door because they could see the problem. They knew what it was. They knew it better than we did. We were young. I don't remember when I registered to vote. As soon as I reached age, I imagine. But we were so young, we had to learn. Somebody must have pointed it out to us that we had to get a certain percentage of the vote in 1972. We had to run statewide to stay a party. It has to be that party, a third party.
This means you already got 3 strikes against you because you don't have the money. Nobody wants to run a party that's not likely to win. So we were lucky we got a young man, football star out of Baylor. There was a lawyer, Ramsey Muniz, and he was willing to run. And that guy could talk. He had the people in the palm of his hand.
Charismatic.
I wish I could do that. But what happened was there was no women on this ballot. And the ladies all spoke up to the gentleman. We had knockdown dragouts. You would think that because this group is oppressed, they allow everybody else to share the power. No. You have to go grab it yourself. You have to express your value and tell them, I worked for it, I earned it, I'm gonna get it. And I did. And the ladies said I was their lieutenant governor candidate. Guess what? A lieutenant governor candidate or somebody who would take that office has an age requirement, 30 years old in Texas. I was 24. I might have voted twice in my life. Well, somebody came up with a bright idea. So we need to change the age requirement because most of our people, 50% of our community was a young age, was the first generation to even participate. So it made a lot of sense. We made that part of the plank of the what to run on for the partido. And there's more to this story, but I'm going to quit by telling you one little example of you can do all the work you want to, but it doesn't end. When we finally ran statewide, the first campaign in 1972, I had half of the vote of my Chicano governor candidate counterpart, 8,000 votes. Now, what made the difference? You got it, you know. But that's the way it is when you're first starting out, you're working, you don't give up. Si se puede, all of these terms, we learned them in the trenches. That's why we come to tell you and give you these messages. This is the way we work. We started as a group of students just like you. And that's the only reason I came out today when my son dragged me over here. He's gonna own. Because I don't talk to the older folks anymore. If they don't have it, if they haven't gotten it by now, you know. And the ones I influenced, they stuck with me. They still call me and ask me, are you gonna vote on that? So that's great. They're activists, they continue, they've got a good foundation. But young people, the way you all are studying what we did or didn't do, what was right, what didn't go right, what to do again, what never to do, it wouldn't work, whatever it is, however the outcome is, the fact that you're even interested kind of gives me hope. I mean, I told Cristina and Jennifer, young girls brought me back to life. Thank you. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Alma. ¿Cómo se ven kami pag? This is Petra.
Okay, first of all, we're not here to let everybody know that we are victims. We're here to let everybody know that we are warriors. Okay, and we're not gonna stop. It's not gonna end today. Okay? So, coming from a farm working family, we, at the time, migrant meant migrant farm workers. We migrated following the crops. Now, I don't know what the hell migrant means because when you say migrant, oh, they don't have any papers. Right? So that's not what migrant meant at the time. So we were farm workers, we would leave I'm the product of PSA Schools Department. PSJA, Far San Juan Island.
Go
That's
there.
what PSJA stands for. One high school for 3 towns. You spoke one word in Spanish, with a ruler on your hand. Sometimes you would bleed. Okay? Now, we were farm workers, they didn't want us in schools. But here's the deal, we went to school January, part of January, February, and maybe 2 weeks in March. Okay? We went up north. We could not go to school over there. And if we did, they would put us all in one building, first grade to whatever. Okay? But in my case, I was the oldest of the family. So I babysat my 5-year-old, my brother who was younger than me, 5 years. At 5, I babysat my brother. 7, brother and sister. 10, another brother. By 11, I was old enough to work with my parents in the fields. So think about how much school I had. I dropped out of 4th grade. So I got married, had 2 children. By the time I was 18, I was already divorced with 2 children, working in the fields. Okay? So I was in the state of Utah, working in the fields. And they used to have a program called Vista. And I know some of you guys know what Vista was. It was a government program for rich white kids who their parents didn't want to go to Vietnam. Okay? So one of those guys got together, they used to work with the migrants. And one of them said, you know, you're too smart to be working in the fields. I thought, gee, I'm smart, right? 18, 19. So they got me a job working as a janitor in a hotel, working with people who do sign language. That was the only thing they could talk with. And I was the only one who talked. So they had coffee break. We never had coffee breaks in the fields, right? So all that was new. Then my kids were going to Head Start. Then somebody said, you know, you're so involved in Head Start. Why don't you come work with us at the Utah Migrant Council? My first education. I said, okay. They made me the parent coordinator of the Migrant Child Development Centers for the whole state of Utah. We organized them through the Migrant Council. Then one of the person who was in charge said, sister, I just got a grant for health. So you're in charge of all the daycare centers. What's the minute? I had to write grants, proposals, and I had to fight in Washington, D.C., compete with Head Start people to get money. I did it. Okay? And from there, I ran all the programs for the state of Utah. Then people got organized in Idaho and they said, you know what? How many of us get started over here? So we got started in Idaho. Again, I used to go maybe twice a week from Boise to Nampa to go help them organize. And they said, why don't we just hire you? I got hired. I started all the daycare programs over there. And I used to hire an individual that was a director for each center. Then they hired this guy to be my boss. One of the things that I want to make sure that we understand here is that we as women never got recognition for any of our accomplishments. So we need to do that. Okay? Eventually, when that happened, I left the Migrant Council. I came to school at Jacinto Trevino, but then Jacinto Trevino closed. So I had to go back to Idaho. Then I started school. And then I was recruited by Jacinto Trevino people. Came to Jacinto Trevino. And they asked me at the office, you know, we don't have a copy of your high school diploma. I said, I don't have it. What do you mean? You have 60 some hours of school and you don't have a diploma? We can push your GED. And I said, GED, what's a GED? So they sent it to San Benito. And no, not to study, to go get my GED.
Oh.
So I went, remember, I was around all of these intelligent, smart people, but no women. I was the only female. I heard about people like her mother, and other people about these great women, but they were not around me. They were in other different places. I was in the beginning. So what happened? They sent me to go get my GED. I get there and I told the lady I needed a GED. She said, okay, here's a pencil. Fill it up. When you finish, let me know. I'm done. Give me another one. I'm done. Okay, you're done. You're getting the mail. I was a little bit confused. So I get back to work the next day because I was working at that but then you know, I'm taking classes. And the secretary again says, so when do you start your classes? Oh, that's kind of weird. I'm taking classes already, right? He says, I said, what classes? Your GED classes. What GED classes? She didn't tell me anything at the place. 2 weeks later, I got my GED. Now, think about it. How did I learn? How did I learn all this stuff? From others. We learn, we can teach each other. And we need to keep it going. Eventually, I got my bachelor's. Took me 15 years, but I got it. Right after that, I got my master's and my PhD. Woo! My area. My area is public relations, campaigns, broadcasting, journalism. That's my area. And you know what? It makes me feel so good when I see my students being producers. Televisión, Channel 5, Channel this, Channel that. And it makes me feel so good because you know what? I'm still teaching right now, even though I'm retired, I'm still teaching. Okay? I teach dual credit. So I remind my students about my life and how they have to do better because they have the opportunity, even though their parents might not agree with me, or the teachers might not agree with me at all. I still work my booty out to make these people better. And we gotta sit together. Let's not stop. Thank you so much. Wow. Yeah, you're done.
Wow, qué honor estar aquí. My name is Jessica Martinez. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Texas at El Paso. And I had the honor to listen to the 1 hour interviews of two of these women here. And I am deeply moved by your works and how you have paved the way for many Chicanas like me and my colleagues here. I do have some questions though. Can you please elaborate more on how being a brown woman either affected, challenged, or influenced your work in the politics? I know you covered it, but you only had 10 minutes. So if you want to elaborate more on that,
What were you asking? What were the questions?
as a brown woman or as a Chicana, Latina, how can you please elaborate more on how how it either affected, challenged, or influenced your work in la política?
And not let it go back. And stand for what you believe and stand for your rights. Okay? And know that you do have support from us, from other people. Even though politicians might not agree with you, I'm still registering people, voters. I'm still working on that. And I belong to the Workers' Vote Party, which is a political party, third party. It kind of divides things. So you kind of have to be careful. Is that it?
Yeah, you can ask it. The same question?
I think that a lot of us they say our formative years are between the years of 1 and 6 years old. At 6 years old, I believed I was special. I was the firstborn in my family. My parents were from Mexico, spoke only Spanish, but my father thought that I should have been a boy. So he treated me like Petra's father did, like a boy. And so I was unafraid of anything. I tried everything. But when I got to school, for the first time in my life, I failed just by showing up and not knowing English. And yes, I was punished like Petra was, and many of you were, for speaking the only language that you knew, because the conventional wisdom of the day in the school system throughout the United States, I don't know about the rest of the world, was that the new language was English, and they're going to slap the other language out of you. And so you either sank or swam. It was called the immersion method of teaching English. Okay. And people say to me, okay, but look, you're successful. You did this, you did that. ¿Qué te hiciste? And I tell them, nobody should have to go through that kind of pressure when you're a child. All the scars that treatment leaves in you has an effect on you. There was a time when I could not give a speech if my audience was Anglo. There was a time when I could not give a speech if my audience had a lot of men in it. Why? Because I was discriminated against by both the Anglo men and the Mexican men in my own family. I'm talking my father, my husband, my brother, because it's a cultural thing, okay? Male and female are two different cultures. Anglo-Mexican, two different cultures, ethnic groups, whatever. We are all different, and yet we are all the same. So today, the method is a transitioning from the language that you know to the language that you need to learn. English is the language of power, no question. I want everyone to learn English, but not at the expense of the beautiful Hispanic heritage, the Mexican American heritage that we carry in our hearts.
I think the question was, what did we do?
What made you such an advocate? By being brown. Okay. You are brown, right?
Kind of, sort of.
In the summer, I get.
Yeah, Suntan Ocean.
Okay, I guess the question is, what makes us get to the point where we become active,
Yes.
an activist? What keeps us going? How can we impress upon young people that are here today to follow our example or to be inspired by our example, maybe? It was necessity. It was survival.
Yes.
We had to do it.
Yes.
Most of us were older girls in our family.
Yes.
And if there was nobody else to rely on to keep the family food on the table, we worked just like everybody else. Everybody had a job to do within the family unit. So that gave us basic skills. We could fix anything, I guess, or we could solve any problem. We just set our minds to it and we kept on going. We didn't quit because it wasn't an expectation. It was no, what do they say when it's not an option, it's not an option, let's say, that you could quit. Because we were already at the bottom. We already had to keep on going. We already were the first in our family to do whatever. We had to set the example and we had to make it work. I think we had to make it work and we wanted to work for the next generation. We have kept an eye out. And nowadays, I think if they were to tell some of our young people denied entry or opportunity, we would come out like, what do they call it? Colmenas?
Yeah.
Those are mama bears in the beehive.
Killer bees.
Yeah, the killer bee.
Your turn, Anita.
Okay, to me, in order to continue in the fact que soy morena, is working with data. We cannot start thinking, I am in cuando muere, I know I think. No, look at data. For the first time in history in Texas, 52% son Latinos. I mean, that tells you that's not a thing.
Pero that means we need to, education has to happen in a family. TWC announced that for the first time in history, 47% of the workforce is Latino. And they didn't say, unfortunately, yo dije, unfortunately, Latinos have the lowest academic achievement. So yo fui a senté con Governor Abbott y dije, so what are we gonna do now? If Latinos are a majority now, and yet we're the ones that have the lowest jobs, how are we gonna support Texas? What are we gonna do? That's a fact. Okay, so education is extremely important. It's extremely important to look at data because the legislators will put out laws. And school districts, if this room was full of superintendents right now, I would still say this. A lot of times it's a checkbox. So if I'm gonna give a diploma, as I have for 28 years, and I wanna say, what is the purpose of me taking up that place? I want to be able to say, here's a paper that's getting you ready for college and a paper getting you ready for a job entry opportunity, CTE. Go back to your schools and ask, how strong is my CTE program? You're giving children options. And every school trustee should be educated and to look at data. It's not about going to a meeting once a month. The governor knows, he knows that 52% are Latinos. He knows that we're the lowest academic achievement. Data, facts.
And I'm a member of Mothers Against Abbott.
Mom. Come here.
Now we can open up questions to the audience. If anyone has any, I'm happy to hand you the microphone.
There's one of these. Llévate este.
There another one?
Hi. So I looked at the pamphlet and I saw that one of you was an attorney. Oh, hi. So what type of attorney are you? What do you fight for? And for an attorney, do you represent the client in the courtroom or something else?
Thank you. I wanted to be a litigator. In other words, do trial work. And so when I graduated from law school, I was 43, not exactly a young person. And so my first job was clerking for a federal judge in Brownsville. But then when I came to Hidalgo County, where I was going to live, I went to the courthouse and said to the judges, we had no public defender system, that I wanted to represent the people that had no money, because I had the luxury to be able to do that. This was like my second or third career. And so at the courthouse in Hidalgo, you would put your name up on every courtroom and say available for court appointments. I wanted to get my feet wet. I wanted to do trial work and then move on to the big stuff. I never moved on to the big stuff because I love the little stuff. I love representing women and I love representing juveniles. Neither group had any money, so the court would pay me something like $90 an hour, which is not very much money when lawyers were earning $100 to $200 an hour. But again, I had the luxury to be able to do that. I represented all kinds of criminal cases. I was a criminal defense attorney and I loved it. And then after that, I started doing divorces, wills, probate, all the little stuff that a general practitioner does. And I loved it. I made a good living out of it. Back then, we couldn't advertise. And so the way that you would get known in the community, as small as mine, was to be out and about, like join the Kiwanis Club and the Rotary Club. And then I did something that was, I thought, pretty brilliant. I ran for office for the city council, and that gets your name out there. First woman ever on the city council in Edinburgh, and I served for 7 years. And then I ran for judge after that and I lost. And now looking back, I'm glad because the judges don't fare well in that profession. I love representing criminal defense. And I now run an immigration office for the Diocese of Brownsville, which is only 5 women. And all we do is fill out petitions for people to legalize their status in the United States. We help Sister Norma with all the kids that are coming in from Central America. I want to say something about, I think you mentioned migrant, difference between a migrant and an immigrant. Very important distinction. A migrant is someone who lives here for us and then moves with the crops. But an immigrant is someone who's actually coming from another country. There's another distinction. The kids that come from Central America are refugees and asylum seekers. That's a different status. And there's a law that protects them. And that's why we, the church, support them when they come over here. They're actually released into our care by Border Patrol. So Sister Norma and other groups like her, Good House Council or Good Settlement House in Brownsville, we provide what they need for their journey. That's all we do. We're not trafficking in immigrants at all. We do it legally. So I guess that advocating for people since I was a little kid, it's been borne out in my later life. I will always be an advocate. Sometimes you're just born with that. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my question is prompted by something that Ophelia said, but I think if any of you could answer this, and I was thinking about your comment that it felt really different to speak in front of an audience that was Chicana, right? As opposed to when you had to speak in front of men or in front of the white audience. And I was wondering how you were able to overcome that. And moving across those 2 audiences in sort of work, like what was different about the things that you said, and how were you able to basically be a translator, right? You guys have talked about being translators too, so those are your like translating to a different audience. What that is hostile.
But just going to answer your question and then I'll add to it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we learned is that as translators, is that we were not just translators, we were mediators. If the farmer told my dad, hell, I don't need to work here. If I told that to my dad would probably be the hell out of that, right? So we had to think how we were gonna translate it, so we would, say it differently. When the priest told my dad that he couldn't go to my sister's burial, the priest goes, tell your father that his child died because he doesn't go to church. You think I was gonna tell that to my dad? So we kind of have to be careful how we translate it, because sometimes it doesn't mean the same thing. So I had to tell my dad, he says he's gonna try. Okay, so I think it's how we see the question or how we see what we're translating and how we put it forward to make it positive, but also at the same time, kind of giving information that's needed for whatever decisions are made.
For me, it was forgiveness. I had to learn to forgive the institutionalized racism that had affected my life and the life of my siblings and all the people that I love. And then it also had to do with how I felt about myself. One thing about women, and I think all of you will agree that are here, we want to be liked. That's our biggest flaw. We want everyone to love us. We don't want them to call us the B word, right? And so I had to get past that. And when I earned my law degree, I did. And when people ask, what do you do, little lady? Then I'm an attorney. And the look on their face, it was worth the 3 years of hell in law school.
Just following up on what they mentioned, you have to know your audience. You really have to know your audience. Like I mentioned, to me, I've stuck to data. This is what it's saying. So you need to know your audience, you need to know your topic. With this, I hope
doesn't get you very far.
Facts,
That's a fact.
yes, yes.
And can I mention, Governor Abbott, I know, okay, it's political and everything. No, to me, he's a governor and I'm gonna work with him. Because this is the data that I have.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Joanna Cardoza. I want to start by thanking UTA for putting this together. I've lived in Arlington most of my life, and I was the first Latina to run for city council here in Arlington. And I love by less than 10% of the vote, and that was my first time running. So.
Wow, well, you did
Good
a job.
Wanted to ask you, also a big community leader, big community advocate, and I tried really hard to get our community engaged here. And I block walk and I bring my flyers and everything, but how do we get them to really get involved? I think I heard one you say that you cook the arroz and the frijoles. I like that idea. But how can we, besides knocking on doors, like how can we really get people to show up at community meetings or more engaged in the process? Do y'all have any ideas?
One of the things when I spoke about the IAF is that they do their homework before they meet with the people that they want to get involved. You have to spot your leaders in every community, your donachonas, right? But then you have to learn about them. Okay, so I met this lady, Ophelia de Santos. What does she care about? What motivates her? Who are her friends? Who is she connected with? And then you go and you sit down with them before you even recruit them to vote or whatever. Sit down with them and have a conversation and say, would you really like to change things in your community? And what really bothers you? What is the biggest thing on your mind? What do you want for your children and your grandchildren? And once you do that and you be genuine about it, you can't be like, I'm just asking you the questions and you're writing them down and you're taking them seriously, they will follow you. They will follow you and you have to produce for them.
To me, it's education. You have to continue educating the voter. You have, so you voted, who did you vote for on the last election? Was I voted for Mr. Lucio. Did you follow Mr. Lucio while he was our representative? Tell me one law, something he did. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, no sé, yo no me voté por él. So it's education. You need to continue educating. And then if you're the one doing the blood walking, you're the candidate, then you tell them, this is my dream, this is what I would like to do. Can our dreams match? And look for the donachonas, there's donachonas everywhere. They're everywhere, and they're the ones that are willing to sell me.
Yeah. That's why they are badge. We want badges that say donachona.
Another thing, I could say a little bit about, when you do community work and you're trying to get people to come around, listen to what their needs are. They will identify the needs for you. I mean, a daycare center might be great, but they have a relative at home that's helping with childcare. Yeah. But they may need something else and they will identify that for you. Childcare can be inconvenient if they work the night shift. So a daycare, they're not going to come out and attend your meeting if it's for just daytime hours when they don't need that childcare at those hours. They have to, we tend to think of you people need this because we've been trained or we've been active or we've lived it or those kinds of things. But listen, you see, I sit back a lot. It's part of that training of interviewing folks. They will reveal things to you and we're constantly learning because otherwise we get behind. We don't keep up with the times. Things are dynamic, they change. And so what we assume, oh, that part of town probably needs so-and-so. Well, maybe not. We need to, what was it? Homework, study, know what you're, before you come to that meeting. So that'll help you, I think, with your audience.
And don't give up.
Don't give up.
Keep on going.
for all the donaciones.
I'm Linda Garcia Merchant, and I know a couple of them actually. The question I have, this is a really beautiful moment
Yes.
because you are in front of an audience of people, some of whom know who you are, some who don't, some of them learning about you all. As a part of a project that is extending this history and this understanding and awareness, what would you like to see as a takeaway from this group?
Okay, I think one of the best things about being here today for me is that there's so many other people that have so many things to offer. And I think we need to continue somehow with doing events like this. Because this is where we also learn how to do things and what is it that needs to be done. You know, I had a list of organizations when I was active that I was gonna talk about, aside from other stuff that I can read. But these people here, I have Lalo Delgado from Denver, I have Corky Gonzalez, I have Emma Tanayuca, you know, that's Michelle. Okay, I have Jose Montoya, I have Ricardo Favela, I have Mariana Rodriguez in Austin, and who was one of the people that got me into the World World Party. Poets, Corky, all these people, and they're all men. They're all men. Where are we? Okay. All these organizations, Bless Me, Luna, Ed Guatemala, you know, who was organized also by Mayor, Farm Workers Club, you know, organizations like that. Linda Ronstadt was one of the few females, and she helped us organize in Utah in the 70s. Linda Ronstadt, who knows that? Okay, so think about those things. We need to take what we're getting from you guys here. I'm sorry for saying you guys, I used to live in New York. From everybody. So we need to take that and we need to expand it and pass it on. Okay, please do.
Gloria and I in the car this morning, started talking about having this kind of function, just exactly like this at UTRGV.
Yes.
Knowing full well that the people in power would probably not be that supportive, but there will be somebody in one of the departments in one of the schools that will be supportive. And so now that we know each other, we work in the same area and we have never met.
Yeah.
This young lady here is from my hometown, but she left town before I came back to town. So, and then this young lady lives in PSJA where I graduated 1 year ahead of her, because I'm older, right? Yeah, and so now we know each other.
I'm younger.
Now there's a possibility for us to move forward exactly with what you all are putting here together.
See, you know, basically, we have a moral obligation.
Yes, we do.
To continue this work.
Yes.
If data is telling us that in our schools, 52% son Latinos like us, shame on us if we don't continue educating. If data is telling us that 47% of our workforce in Texas son Latinos, and we're not getting them registered to vote so they can have a voice in the future, shame on us. So we have an obligation. It's an obligation to do this to the education system. And that's why I really want this in the ballot. So that we can continue educating. I am just so impressed with these young ladies that are PhD, 3 years, 4 years, and I'm like, wow. Yeah. So we have to continue the work.
And one thing that I need to say, because we're talking about UTRGV. You have to be very careful who you're communicating with, who you're trying to get you there. We've had a lot of problems in UTRGV that deals with control. It's still the valley. And there's very few people at UTRGV They're able. We just had Juan Tejeda con Juntos Land on Wednesday. Okay? And there were only like 5 students there. Okay? Think about it. We can bring people over, but we need to be careful who we deal with. Chicana, Mexican American Studies is not free right now in DOD. When we started it, it was so strong. So find your context, find your people that are doing the right stuff and have the power. I'm at SPC, I can't do nothing. I'm a lecturer at SPC. I have no power. And the other people are not very interested in my politics or what I represent. So please, make sure you find the right context, especially you Puerto Ricans, we need you there. We really, really need you there.
I agree that many people need to be recognized. Well, let me start with that. I am grateful to recognize you all today because you are special women. We look up to you, and I'm glad that you're here letting us know what is happening in our community. I agree that many people need to be recognized on the first and in our community. And some of you girls are the first to do things for us to see, and we are witnessing it now. I didn't know, and I think I speak for a lot of people here that they didn't know either. And as the Latin community, we're learning. I think that we need to learn about ourselves, who we are. We need to educate ourselves about our Latin community and what is happening, because we don't know. It's like we're looking up to someone we don't know. And now I feel like today is a new day. That's happening in our Latin community. And thank you, because yes, we can. In Spanish, it's what? And I have a question to Gloria. What are we doing for our high school students to know about their jobs that are the jobs for their future, for what's happening to them in high school, after high school? Because a lot of students, I feel that just go right into the community to work and not get educated. And so I think that we should educate our high school students so that they too can know what kind of jobs out there. Because we can just go all of a sudden to be a waiter or work at fast food, but what can we do for our community to start educating them so that they too in high school can go further, instead of you saying that we have a low academic? Thank you.
That's a very good question. Dios está everywhere, because I was hoping someone would ask me that. Going back to what Petra was saying, where she teaches, where kids go in and they don't even know pa donde o qué or what. That's very, very hurtful. And I think it all goes back to your school trustees. It doesn't go back to the superintendent, it goes back to the school trustees. Because trustee means that you trust that person that you put on the schoolwork. And if you don't have confidence in that trustee to know what they're doing, that's where the problem begins. As I said, I've been a school trustee for 28 years. I'm learning. About 3 years ago, I learned about CCMR. CCMR is the Texas Education Agency way to measure how the child is when they walk the stage. College, career, military ready. Okay, so with my school district was at 52% CCMR, and my other colleagues were like, well, Gloria, these were 50%, and I said, or more. I said, okay, you tell me, which are the kids, the 48% you don't care what happens to them? Tell me. You have to care for every single child, and as a school trustee, keep remembering the word trustee. The community trusts that person to be doing what's best for your child. Public education, ahorita, it's really, really hurting. I will tell you. It's hurting because we're checking a lot of boxes. Ya lo hicimos. Like this past year, the legislative session passed a rule, a law, that financial literacy would be taught in school. Go back to your school and ask them, how are you teaching our kids about financial literacy? So what's the use that they pass all these laws if we don't think that they get implemented? So next time you see a school trustee, ask him, how are you making sure that every child graduates with the ability with choices to go to college or to go into a job entry position? And I don't mean, I'm not talking bad about waitresses and this and that, but there's waitresses that earn a lot of money. But I'm just saying, let them have choices. And that's not happening right now in public education. It's not. You know, my husband would tease me because I would cry at every graduation. I would cry because I knew the scores. And I could see the parents from balloons, congratulations. El marrano ya estaba barbecuing for the graduation party. And the poor child didn't even know what they were gonna do. And as a trustee, I take that very seriously. They trusted me to make sure that their child was ready for the world. So don't forget the word trustee. Go back and ask them. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Oh, okay.
Thank you all so much. This is an amazing project, and it's been an honor listening to your stories. One of the questions I had was kind of related to something that Olivia said about, as a question someone asked about how to overcome, you were having, not wanting to speak to anger, etc. My question is related to that in terms of what has sustained you in the difficult times, because I think a lot of people here are doing the work today as well. We're learning so much from you, but the thing about like sustaining our spirits, and that's the question, if you have any advice about that.
I ended up in law school because my husband got a job as a superintendent, and I always follow my man. I'm being sarcastic, but I do love him. 55 years, 55 wonderful years this May. So we're in Houston, and I just want to stay home and take care of the kids for a little while, take a break. And I had been doing all this organizing and stuff, and he says, what are you gonna do now? I said, how about if I go back to school and get my master's in political science? I love political science. He goes, it's not a marketable degree. What's wrong with you? You need to go to law school. I go, what? Are you crazy? I said, law school? With kids? And my oldest one was in college at that time. And he said, yeah, why not? And I said, you have to be really smart. And he goes, and named me this lawyer and this lawyer and this lawyer. And I was like, you got a point there. By that evening, he had an LSAT book, slapped it down at home in our apartment in Houston and said, study this, because first thing you have to do is this. My husband has always pushed me, always. And I love him for that. And so I took the LSAT in Beaumont. It was the worst day of my life. I excuse the guys that are here, but I got diarrhea and my period at the same time. Taking that test, I don't lie about things like that. It was horrible, and I didn't score well. I'm not a good test taker. And so I came home and I said, oh, forget it, nice dream, but it's not gonna happen. And my husband goes, well, wait till your score comes in. Well, it came in and I'm gonna happen. And he says, call your professor at Pan American University. I don't think it was RGB yet. And he said, and talk to him. The one that taught you constitutional law, Jerry Polinar, talk to him.
I know.
So I did. I called him and I said, it's really bad. He goes, let me call my friend, the dean of students, Murray Nasinowitz, and see what I can do. And so I said, oh, it works like that? Yeah, that's who you know, right? So he called him and Murray said, tell her to come see me. We'll get her in. It's her job to stay in. And so I said to me that evening, I'm getting in, but I have to stay in. He goes, And like, so what? The first semester was horrible. I cannot begin to tell you. I'm a strong person. I can withstand anything, but the first semester, they try to break you down. They don't want you because you're Mexican. They don't want you because you're a woman. So I had a double whammy going in. My class was 105 people. We traveled together like a herd from professor to professor. I met my contracts professor exactly like the movie 1L. If you want to go to law school, you have to see the movie or read the book 1L. And so I, I went to her halfway through the semester. My best friend in the world is dying from cancer. And her mother calls me and says, I'd like for you to do Diana's eulogy. And I'm like, you can't even, like, Jose Alfredo Gutierrez told me, you can't even find time to go to the bathroom when you're in law school. You study all the time. I cried every day when I got home, just from the stress of it. But I couldn't say no to Diana's mother. So I prayed that she would die on a weekend, right? I'm serious. I'm telling you like it is. And it was horrible. And she died on Halloween, October the 31st, on a Wednesday. I had to take 2 days off. Contracts, you could not miss. If you missed contracts more than 5 or 6 times, you were out, not only from contracts, the entire semester. That's how powerful that class was. Her name was Barbara White. I will never forget Dr. Barbara White from New York City. And so I had someone record the class for me. I had someone take notes for me. And I went home and I buried my friend. And I came back and then I had all my stuff and I thought, you know, they call you and you don't answer, you get a cross in your name. So I'm gonna go talk to her. She's a woman, right? She'll understand. So I went to Dr. White, my best friend died, cancer, blah, blah, blah. And she looks at me and she goes, oh, forgot to mark you absent. And she marks me twice. And I walked out of there and I thought, the hell, you know? And I went back to my little carrel because they give you a little study area because your books are too heavy to carry. And I just sat there and I cried. And then I saw a little card that my friend Diana had given me when I got accepted to law school. And there's this young lady standing with her feet far apart, holding a little briefcase and wearing a gray suit. And she goes, congratulations, now you get to wear a dorky gray suit. And then she encourages me. She died from cancer and she takes the time to encourage me to stay in law school. And that's when I dried up my tears and I said, to hell with these bastards, I'm gonna make it through no matter what. And I did. And the other thing you need to know about law school, and I told you this, was in my second semester, my husband gets a job offer in San Benito and says, we're moving back to the valley, you're staying up here to finish law school and sell the house and do whatever else needs to be done. And then I get sick and I end up in the hospital and I have to have a hysterectomy. So law school took a lot from me, but here I am, okay? I left my uterus in law school.
You know, I'm so glad she made it. Because you know what? There is nothing worse than taking the LSAT exam. I took it. And then I paid $400, $300 for every single law school I went to. And Talinar, the guy she just talked about, was the head of political science department.
Yes.
But I was in my 40s, I think. Yeah, something like that, 30s and 40s. So he didn't really care about advising me, so I had no financial aid advisement. They wanted $600 to save my seat. Okay, so I'm so glad she made it and she's still alive. I didn't. Even though I took the.
You're alive.
And I know I'm alive. And I took the LSAT again after my master's. No difference in the grade.
I wanted to share with these ladies, you know, I dropped out of college. I did it with 90 hours because we were in Michigan. I wanted to go home. My husband had his degree. He asked people what we were gonna do. Let's go home. We went home. I became a trustee and what have you, but Fourth child, walked to Station College. My husband leaned over and I thought he was gonna say something romantic, like, yeah, that we made it. Me dice, ¿y tú cuándo vas a hacer? ¿Cuándo vas a acabar? And I said, no, mira, I have a good job. No, you're spending in stage telling the kids, go to college, y tú ni acabaste. Those were the bad words he said. The bad word he said, yes, he said, o tienes miedo. Dije, miedo. So, thank you very much. I really, really have enjoyed this so much.